Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking Kentucky football, particularly some of the disappointments that they've had this season, and also the long-term vision with Mark Stoops being the head of the program. They're right now Mark Stoops in his 12th season as head coach of Kentucky, and special guest Preston Rowe, D1 coach. Has extensive experience. He's coached at Richmond. He's coached at Louisiana Tech and Kentucky State. So it's great to have you on, and I'm super excited to have you on. And I know you have your own show, Trash Talk Tailgate. Can you just talk about a little bit that with the audience?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a D1 football coach. I've been a defensive backs quality control at various D1 schools, and I love football, but one of the things that I just love talking ball. And so one of the things that I decided to do recently is I just got so sick and tired of all these, so-called experts who go on TV and, they just say a bunch of random stuff and they don't really know what they're talking about. And I consider myself a football purist at heart. And I'm just like, bro, like y'all don't know what you're talking about at all. So I just decided one day, I was just like, hey, you know what? I want to start talking about football. And, anyone who wants to listen to me, that's great. I think I bring a very unique and in-depth analysis to the game that I love so much. And that's what the Trash Talk Tailgate is. Everyone at the Trash Talk Tailgate, we want it to be fun. We talk a lot of shit. Like, we just hate bad football. So, we talk shit about the Jets. We talk shit about the Browns. If you do something dumb, we're going to make fun of you for it in the absolute worst, most hilarious way possible. But we also want to, really have in-depth analysis and real in-depth discussions and breakdowns. Because I believe, as someone who has watched film my whole life, because that's my job, is breaking down film, and I have to know this stuff. A lot of people, they think they know football, but they really don't. And not that in depth, you know what I mean? So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. And I appreciate you letting me come on here and promote the Trash Talk Tailgate. So please, if you haven't, go give us a chance. Go like, comment, subscribe. We're steadily growing, and we're really, really excited. So
Yeah, I appreciate you not sharing that with the audience, and definitely even just hearing you talk, your passion, your energy, and just your knowledge of the game, definitely speaks through the screen. So with that said, talked about your Kentucky State experience, and you're familiar with the area and everything. What has been the general vibe over in Lexington? Obviously, they've struggled over the past couple seasons. Only three wins of more than 8 wins, other than if you count the 2021 season. I'll say 3, even though it's technically vacated. But what have you seen from Kentucky this season, and what do you think they have to improve on?
So this is I mean, I'm not in the area anymore, but like you said, I was for a little bit. I was there during 2019 when they had I can't remember the receiver's name, but they had a receiver playing quarterback for most of the year.
Lynn Bowden.
Yeah,
Jr.
Lynn Bowden. That's who it was.
Yes.
That's who it was. Yeah. And then I actually went to the Virginia Tech Kentucky bowl game because I'm a Virginia Tech fan. But and they beat us. But so from what I've seen and from people, who I still talk to in the area, I think a lot of it, at least for this year, I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that Mark Stoops, at least in the reporting, was very, very interested in the Texas A&M job that opened up this past offseason. And I've heard a lot of speculation from people that, I know who have said, did he kind of quit on the program a little bit? And did the players kind of quit on him? Maybe. But then I don't know. It's because then they go out, you hear stuff like that, and then they go out and they beat the shit out of Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is a top SEC team. They played Georgia really, really tough this year. They probably should have won that game. I really thought Mark Stoops blew that game. And I'm a huge Mark Stoops fan. I think what he's done at Kentucky is awesome. Like I've said for a long time, Mark Stoops is one of the most underrated coaches in the country because Kentucky, it's a basketball school. You don't have a lot of football resources. And you were never really good. Like historically, they're not a great football program. And to, consistently be second and third in the SEC East, to a juggernaut Georgia team, that's pretty damn impressive. This year, like I said, I've heard people tell me maybe they quit a little bit on Mark Stoops. I also just I don't think their offensive line is as good as it used to be in the past.
Oh, 100%.
Because that to me, so I'm a football purist, like I said. I believe that in order to win a football game, you have to dominate up front. And it all starts up front. The offensive and defensive lines. If you cannot control the line of scrimmage, you're not going to be successful, especially in the SEC. And that was the thing that really made Kentucky really, that took them from a doormat in the SEC to being really competitive, is the fact that Mark Stoops was able to kind of build those offensive and defensive lines. And I just don't think they're that good up front this year. Yeah,
because even, statistically speaking, just based off what you said, I watched the Tennessee game too, and one of the things that jumped out to me was how much pressure Brock Vandagriff was under. And in general, too, they've struggled passing the ball. I mean, if you see the stat on the ticker, they haven't had a single 3,000-yard passer in his tenure. And, you briefly mentioned Lynn Bowden. We can even think back, and you can think of Devin Leary, for example. You think of Will Levis. And yes, exactly what you're saying. They've been consistent, but also there's been this limited ceiling that they've had in general, too. And, you talked about the offense for a second, too. I mean, there's definitely been some question marks in terms of some of his offensive coordinator hires, since it's kind of been it's just kind of treading in the wrong direction in terms of, bringing in somebody, then he's there for a season or two, and you're constantly changing the schemes and all that. And, with your coaching experience, I'm sure you're aware of how sensitive that can be in terms of, changing schemes, getting new coaches in there, and all that good stuff too. Yeah. And, with that said too, we briefly talked about the offense, and, I think one of their strengths, and Mark Stoops in general's strengths, have always been their defense in particular. Mm-hmm. And back in 2022, he signed a really big contract extension up until 2030. And the stat I have now is that it would be a $40 million buyout if Kentucky were to let go of Mark Stoops in any way. So with that said, I guess it's a two-part question. One, what do you think Mark Stoops' long-term game plan would be at Kentucky? Like, do you think he would ever possibly consider taking another job? And then B, do you ever think Kentucky could possibly pull the trigger on letting Mark Stoops go, or do you think they're just kind of stuck with him?
I don't think you're stuck with Mark Stoops. I think if you're Kentucky, and obviously, I'm not in the administration, I'm not the athletic director, but this is my opinion. Yeah. If you fire Mark Stoops, you're fucking insane. Like, this dude brought your program from a perennial doormat and laughingstock to now you are competing in the SEC East every single year. Like, you are competitive. I know this year has been a down year, but every year before that, you've been really competitive, and you've punched above your weight class, so to speak. And his recruiting has been really good. One of the things that I don't think people talk about Mark Stoops was really smart. So Kentucky, it borders the state of Ohio. And what a lot of teams in the SEC do is they go down south to try to get talent. Well, it's Kentucky. You're probably not going to win a lot of those big-time recruiting battles. So what Mark Stoops did is he started going up north to the state of Ohio. And Ohio is loaded with talent too. And a lot of those kids that, weren't going to go to Ohio State, Mark Stoops started getting them. And they're still really good football players. And they can play in the SEC. And that's how you raise the floor of a program like that. And that's what he did. The fact that you're seeing this, it's not just Kentucky. You're seeing this a lot all across the country. And in coaching, I've had to deal with it. It's you're a victim of your own success. Like, people have gotten so accustomed to winning at Kentucky because of Mark Stoops, and now he has one down year. Everyone freaks the fuck out. Like, you're seeing it at Clemson. You're seeing it at Alabama. You're seeing it at Penn State with James Franklin. Like, all across the country, these really successful, long-tenured coaches, people are asking if they should be fired because they're not living up to their own success that they created the standard for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you make a great point too. We live in such a now society that, back in the day, when we were beginning to watch college football, back in the, probably 2000s, it was normal for a guy to have 5+ seasons to get him on board. And then obviously if you don't win by 6 games by then, okay, that's reasonable to get canned.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with you. But, but on the flip side of that, like I was saying, is, even if a guy does have, success early, if he has one down year because of the success he already had, people freak out about that. Like, it's a no-win situation. And I think Mark Stoops is still a really good coach. Now, and I think we saw this with John Calipari. Like, eventually the fan base just gets so toxic for you. Like, yeah, the school's not going to fire you, but you might just want a fresh start and go somewhere else. Like, could I potentially see that happening? Maybe. I mean, it's still Kentucky football, though. Like, I don't know if they're going to be that toxic. I mean, Penn State with James Franklin, that might be the case. I don't think Dabo Swinney's going to go anywhere. Like, I don't know. It's just these fan bases are insane. Like, they're insane.
Yeah, because
it's hard to win football games. It's really hard to win football games.
Yeah, and that's the balance you're trying to find, right? I mean, as you said before, Kentucky doesn't always have the best in-state recruits. So you have to venture out and go to Ohio or go to West Virginia or go to Tennessee and doing all that too. And meanwhile, you find that balance too. Like, yes, you don't want to be such a doormat in the SEC, and yes, they play tough games every year. But to some extent, when you think to yourself, hey, if Kentucky can average 8 to 10 wins a season, win the Governor's Cup, and consistently get a top 25 recruiting class, I'm struggling finding things to kind of complain about too, because what's ironic was last year when, A&M was ready to pull the trigger on Mark Stoops, everybody was like, oh, what are we going to do without Mark Stoops? And now because he has one down year, all of a sudden it turns into, oh, well, we don't need him anymore. Or, oh, he didn't deserve the contract extension or, whatever that is too, because the thing is, we know what his identity is. The identity is defense oriented program, recruiting really well, particularly on the defensive line.
Yeah.
And, and essentially also, working on the fundamentals and really, the whole foundation on offense is being particularly running the ball, even though we have not seen that enough with Bush Hamdan as offensive coordinator this year.
Mm-hmm.
And with that said too, they're 3-6 this season, and they're definitely been struggling to an extent. So with that said, these last couple games, I mean, you have a tune-up game versus Murray State, then you play Texas, and then you play Louisville. So with these next 3 games, like what would you say would be a positive end to this season, and what are some of the adjustments you think that they could make to make it a little bit more respectable, live a little bit more of a positive season, especially when, they got their ass whooped by Florida and they got their ass whooped by South Carolina, and then they turn around and have a formidable game versus Georgia and Tennessee.
I mean, Florida, let's be real though. Florida took Kentucky to the brink with a 3rd-string quarterback yesterday, and South Carolina just beat the hell out of a top 10 Texas A&M team. It's hard to win football games consistently. And sometimes, the ball just doesn't bounce your way, and sometimes you just get really unlucky. I still think Mark Stoops is a damn good football coach. Sometimes you just have a bad year. Like Brian Kelly's had them. Dabo Sweeney's had them. James Franklin's had them. Like it's Nick Saban and all the success he had at Alabama has really distorted what a successful football coach looks like. And now everyone thinks, oh, well, he did it. We should be able to do that. No, he's the GOAT for a reason. Like,
you could even talk about Kurt Signetti too over at Indiana. Yes, he had experience at Holy Cross and James Madison and all of that, but just one guy bringing in the program, these coaches winning in their first year. A lot of the time, it doesn't always happen overnight like that. It's going to take time. You got to build the right people in, and you have to have an identity, which is the one thing I've always admired about Mark Stoops. Is yes, he's had some questionable, maybe offensive coordinator hires and and maybe he's had some struggles getting quarterbacks who can truly develop and all that stuff. But at the same time, exactly what you said. Yes, he is a damn good football coach. He knows the X's and O's, and he understands Kentucky, and he knows how to sell it to recruits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sorry, I kind of got off track, but you asked me what you would want to see out of these next 3 games.
Yeah, like obviously you want to see him win the Governor's Cup and everything, but what sort of adjustments, what sort of quick adjustments would you like to see Kentucky make for these next couple games?
I mean, you kind of talked about their offensive coordinator. I don't know that much about their offensive coordinator, but this is just me. I think if you can just really try to buckle down and try to establish a line of scrimmage, I mean, they're going to beat Murray State, but if you don't beat Murray State, then you have real problems. But I would want to see them really try to buckle down and establish the line of scrimmage and really try to run the football. Because, again, I don't think you can be a consistently successful program if you cannot control the lines of scrimmage. Like football, at the end of the day, can you dominate your man up front? Can you control the line of scrimmage? That's really what it comes down to. And then, all the other stuff follows after that. The thing about, Vanderbilt almost beat Texas. Like Texas, I know they're really talented, but we kind of said this on the Trash Talk Tailgate today. All the great teams, like even the top echelon teams, they all have flaws. Like they've all shown flaws. And, do I think Kentucky can beat Texas? I wouldn't pick them, but I think Texas is a flawed team. They're a really good team. They're flawed. And if Kentucky can, control the line of scrimmage, because Texas has struggled to do that in some games, you have a chance. And then if you want to really ruin your rival season, go out and beat Louisville for the Governor's Cup. Louisville's a really good team. They just upset Clemson on the road in Death Valley. Like, go beat Louisville. Like that's, yeah. But I would want to see them try to establish the line of scrimmage and try to, really be able to run the football, because I know they're still going to play great defense. I mean, look, they shut down an Ole Miss offense that was cooking, and their defensive line got after Jackson Dart. Like, Mark Stoops still knows how to coach. Sometimes it's just you don't have, you get hit with the injury bug, or, just your players just aren't gelling right. Doesn't mean you're not a great coach. Just sometimes you just have a down year.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, because they have 13 injuries on defense too, so they have been hit with the injury bug, and obviously not an easy schedule, and those things kind of just all adding up together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Preston, I appreciate you being generous with your time and talking about Trash Talk Tailgate, and definitely give him a like, a subscribe, and he also has an NFL show that he does too, so definitely check it out, and I appreciate you being generous with your time today.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.